Imagine this. The leader of your country, facing calls to step down, turns around and says, "You want me to go on? Fine, but first, give the money back to the country." I mean, wow. That's a powerful statement, isn't it? It just completely reframes the whole political debate. Suddenly, it's not just about power. It's about financial accountability. Billions of ringgit. What does that actually mean? And what does it signal about, real national independence today? Okay, so Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, speaking in Myanmar recently, he really laid it out there. He didn't name names, but he challenged certain leaders directly, pointing towards, well, claims of massive wealth accumulated by some families. We're talking figures like 4 billion ringgit mentioned, even suggestions of 1.2 billion, maybe 1.5 billion ringgit that he implies should be returned. All this while, some of these figures claim to be fighting for the Malay community, so his message is kind of blunt. Well, you want me out? Let's talk about the money first. Let's talk about what he calls justice for the people. Definitely shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from just politics as usual towards financial integrity.
But what does this really mean for the idea of independence?
Well, that's what's so fascinating, right? How he connects that return the money to this bigger idea of true independence. He's saying it's not just about swapping out colonial rulers for local ones, Malay, Chinese, Indian, Iban, Kadazan leaders taking over. That's step one, maybe. But real independence, he argues, is about tackling the systemic problems, the things that cause division, exploitation right here at home. He believes leadership has to change, has to move past any instances where power might have been misused for personal gain, for family gain. And if you look at the unity government's philosophy as he describes it, it's about action, practical steps, not just relying on slogans like fighting for the Malay race. He's basically saying true patriotism is actually building a strong economy, one that genuinely everyone can benefit from, which naturally leads to the question, okay, how does this focus on action play out with the country's finances, like the national debt?
Yeah, the debt. He's been quite vocal about that. He pointed out that, new national debt hit 100 billion ringgit back in 2022, but he says it's come down since then to 85 billion ringgit in 2024. And he puts this down to his government stopping the practice of taking on what he calls meaningless debts. That's a pretty direct pushback against critics who ask why he keeps bringing up the debt figures. He argues, talking about it constantly isn't about being negative. It's about facing it head on. So future generations aren't stuck with the bill for, past irresponsibility. He even kind of suggested that anyone questioning this focus on debt just doesn't get economics. But that phrase, meaningless debt, it does make you wonder, what's the difference? What kind of debt is meaningful then?
Exactly. And he does draw a line there. It's quite clear. He suggests that, look, if you're borrowing money for, say, essential rural development, projects that genuinely help people lift themselves up, that's just justifiable debt. That's a necessary investment. But debt that was maybe accrued just to support lavish lifestyles for a select few, for leaders and their families, that's the kind of debt, he says, must be resisted, stopped. And this really underlines the unity government's push against corruption, against abuse of power. It's fundamental to their approach. He's careful to frame this anti-corruption drive not as, political revenge, but as a fight for justice, for the people, to build a, quote, cleaner nation. It's like saying you can't build up the country with one hand while it's being torn down by illicit activities with the other. So when you link financial transparency directly to national sovereignty like that, how does that sit with you listening to this? Does it feel like the right connection?
It's definitely a strong connection to make. Now, shifting slightly, but still on the political front, that rally, the anti-Anwar rally that Perikatan National organized yesterday in Kuala Lumpur, the Prime Minister addressed it, and his response was, well, pretty typical Anwar, maybe. A bit of humor. He basically said, they asked me to turn step down, and, well, I did turn in. But to what is our not out of office. It's a playful way to deflect, I suppose. Definitely got some attention. But beyond the rallies, he also got into the cost of living issues, things like fuel prices. He acknowledged the concerns, but also pushed back against what he called misinformation, claims that prices are just going up and up. He actually suggested that for some things, the opposite is true, which is an attempt to manage the narrative with facts, it seems.
Yes, exactly. He's making a very direct appeal there. Asking the public to look at the facts, the data, not just political feelings or maybe dislike for him or his government. He used fuel prices as a specific example, saying claims they're rising are just wrong, that petrol prices have actually decreased recently. Now, he did acknowledge, no government is perfect. Policies aren't always spot on first time. But he stressed they are listening. They're willing to make adjustments. It really emphasizes this focus on evidence-based policy, trying to be transparent. And speaking of political challenges, he also basically said, bring it on. Regarding any no-confidence vote in parliament, he pointed out that the opposition leader, Datuk Seri Hamzah Nududdin, has supposedly been threatening one for, 3 years now? So it shows he's open to the democratic process, but also projecting, quite a bit of confidence in his government's position.
Okay, let's dig into those fuel prices a bit more, because that affects almost everyone. He mentioned RON 95 petrol, the standard grade, right? Recently reduced by 6 sen. Now, 6 sen might not sound like a huge amount in ringgit terms, but he framed it as a significant government effort, because it's done within this big subsidy system where the government isn't actually making a profit on fuel. And then he threw out that challenge. Anyone unhappy should compare Malaysia's prices to Singapore or Thailand or Indonesia, where, let's be honest, prices are much, much higher. And he hammered home the point. Only Malaysian citizens get that super subsidized price, 1 ringgit 99 sen. Non-citizens, they pay more. Around 2 ringgit 50, 2 ringgit 60 sen. This, he says, is a direct benefit for Malaysians, pushing back against some opposition voices, particularly in Johor, who apparently said it's unfair to foreigners.
Right. And that difference in price for foreigners, it begs the question, why? His logic is pretty straightforward, really. Foreigners, he says, don't pay taxes here in Malaysia. And his number one job, as he sees it, is to look after Malaysian citizens first. He basically asked, rhetorically, what other country gives foreigners the exact same subsidized price as its own citizens? It's a fair point to raise. And even at that higher price, 2 ringgit 60, Malaysia's fuel is still incredibly cheap compared to most places globally. He also touched on other things like electricity tariffs, mentioning adjustments that were mainly for industry, not regular households, and importantly, the minimum wage increase, up to 1,700 ringgit. He acknowledged, look, 1,700 ringgit still isn't enough for many people, it's tough, but the government is committed to gradual increases, consistent steps up. And he made a point about big companies, profitable companies, saying they shouldn't just be paying the bare minimum of 1,500 ringgit. So you see this kind of holistic view emerging, strengthen finances through fairer systems, like maybe taxing the wealthy appropriately, and then use that to fund development, support the people.
And it's not just about domestic policy, right? He talked about cooperation, too, specifically with Singapore, highlighting the progress on the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. That's a huge deal for the region, potentially bringing a lot of investment and growth. He gave a shout-out to the Johor Menteri Besar, Datuk On Hafiz, praising his work driving development in the state. He even told a little story, kind of joking, about how often On Hafiz calls him asking for more help for Johor, and his promise to, chase it in the cabinet to speed things up. That kind of collaboration, that working together, it's essential for Malaysia's overall success, isn't it? It makes you think, like he said, who'd have imagined 5 years ago that Johor would be making this kind of progress? It really shows that when people pull together, things can actually change significantly.
Absolutely. And that brings us right back to that central theme he keeps returning to. True independence.
Yeah.
It's not just about politics, not just about the economy in isolation. It's deeper. A systemic change. For Malaysia to be truly independent, in his view, it needs to root out corruption completely, eliminate abuse of power, fix the systems that are flawed, and crucially, free people's minds, protect them from manipulation, from misinformation. He says the cabinet is working hard on this, trying to correct those issues, especially where leaders might have misused power for themselves or their families. But, and this is a big but, citizens also have a role. They need to develop their own intellectual independence, not be easily swayed, not let themselves be used as tools by others. It's really a call for everyone to think critically, to engage with facts so the nation can build itself up without being undermined from the inside.
So there you have it. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's challenge rings clear. You want me to step down. First, return the money to the country. It's a phrase that ties everything together, doesn't it? Fiscal responsibility, fighting corruption, this bigger idea of national independence. From talking about cutting the debt, defending subsidies for citizens, pushing for economic growth with neighbors, the message seems to be we're focused on action, not just talk.
Exactly. The focus is absolutely on a whole transformation. It's not just about who is in charge, but how the country is run. It's about demanding integrity, demanding accountability, making sure policies genuinely serve the people, and really encouraging everyone, all citizens, to engage with the facts, not just, the heat of political argument.
Ultimately, what this discussion highlights is that the conversation about Malaysia's path forward goes way beyond just politics. It touches on fundamental questions of values, of integrity, and what progress actually looks like for every single Malaysian. So maybe the question for you listening is this. What do you think is the single most critical step Malaysia needs to take right now to achieve that true independence the Prime Minister is talking about?